Hello, my name is Ryan,
Hi, I'm Samantha.
Hi, I'm Michelle.
and today we'll be discussing week five or discussion five. So, the first question, chapter one: what are different ways children become involved in their parents' well being, work, and survival in the US? What accounts for the need for such cooperation, or what Yo and Kim call intergenerational dependence? The first thing I have is on page 13 and 14 with Lauren, and she would do everything for her parents after they retired in the early 2000s, from tending to her parents' businesses, legal, and medical matters. To this day, Lauren continues to support her parents in her 30s by paying her parents' mortgage, Medicare, groceries. For Lauren, helping her family is a necessity for her psychological well being. For me, this is one of the more extreme ones where she's helping her parents out in like every way possible financially, which I was surprised about in the beginning. But after seeing other respondents, it kind of seems similar. They also helped in that way.
Yeah. Um. Well, I like like on page for chapter one, page 14, what Lauren said that we as family have to survive, and then she goes on to say that it's not simply a culture mandate um or value, but a practical and necessary result of how immigration made the children's labor vital to the family's overall establishment in the U.S. Um, and then on chapter 15, how it says that studies have shown how children of Korean and other Asian immigrants contribute critically to the collective survival and well being of the family as laborers in family business and primary translators and um, interpreters
Interpreter.
for their household.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I also have that on
And
page 15.
hmm
yeah, I just found that interesting because, like, I mean, I can like relate to that in that sense of like what like in like with studies and stuff like that. And it's just interesting how like finding like other like immigrant families as well, like, children specifically, like, have to like translate. It's not that I didn't know, it's just that like there's just similarities, and it's just interesting that it comes down to like um having parents who immigrated to the US. um so it's just like it was just interesting to know that it was, it's not just like, a different like individual like ethnicities. It's just like overall like like parents who immigrate and they have children and stuff like that here. It's like they have similarities that go hand in hand.
Yeah, it's reassuring for sure. Like seeing other cultures and immigrants with different backgrounds, like having to, survive with like using their kids as like helping, for their jobs and like after they retire. It says on page 16 and 17, it is often described as a labor of love, which means looking after elderly parents is based upon intense feelings and obligation and guilt, as well as love and concern. This was referred to by Early as the act of trying to change in degree or quality of emotion or feelings. I found that very interesting. It was more not as like a commitment, but just like a love, like you just want to help your family.
Yeah, I'd put
Yeah.
that down too.
Mhm.
I wanted to include how um, the the getting good grades was also important because the parents were investing in their children's education in order for them to go to college and eventually go to grad school or medical school or something like that. And they were really dependent on them doing well so they could ensure that their futures were secure, and also perhaps like the parents as well, so that they would be able to be taken care of. Oh, that
Yeah,
was in
I
that
got
was
that on
page
page
14 and
18.
15. Yeah.
It says daughters saw good grades as something they can make or break their parents' day. Sons
Mm-hmm.
weren't really as serious about that, it seemed like.
Yeah. Um, on page 20, um, I believe Dylan explained how his parents said, until you get straight A's, everything else you do is meaningless, even though he was, president to like clubs and like all these other things. Like it just like getting good grades was just like everything like for their parents. Um, so I just thought that like that it was interesting because it was something that like some felt that like they needed to get good grades, others felt like, oh, like, I don't aim to get straight like or get good grades, but like I have to because it's like it's what means like more to my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. They like there was like a mom that had her like daughter's report card and would show it off to people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I thought that was pretty intense. Like I feel like it just depended on the parents what they value with grades. That's what the kids would value, just to make them happy.
And it's kind of crazy how like colleges want you to have good grades and do stuff outside of getting good grades. I
Exactly.
don't
Like,
know. I don't know if that's the same for like when at the time of like when these people were younger, but I thought of that as well.
yeah, it's just not about grades anymore. There's so much other things to consider.
Yeah.
I, I'm not sure if either of you guys talked about it, but how the parents depended on the children's labor. And I wanted to talk. Oh, that's on page 25 and 26. And I wanted to talk specifically about how the kids felt about it, because like they would have to work on their weekends, and they would have to work during their summers, and it just made me really upset. Well, not upset, but it made me feel bad for them because I know like as a child you want that time to be a kid, and they didn't get that opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. Like there was like a 10-year-old kid who would have to work on the weekends, like 12 hours a day. Like I believe he should be having fun. However, it wasn't really his choice.
Yeah, a lot of these kids had to grow up a lot way faster than other kids around them.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like it does mature them a lot quicker, but
Yeah, yeah,
at
that's
what
true.
cost?
Yeah. Um, as like I mentioned like before, like along with like, helping like in family businesses, on page 29 it talks about like being children of like immigrant parents being language brokers, I believe, if that's correct. um and it says it was acting as their parents compass for survival in the post migration world. And how like children like found like being able to translate for like their parents, they found it as like a way to like say like, oh, I'm like independent and like mature type of thing. So I found that kind of interesting because like I can't remember what page it was on, but it talked about how like when parents like immigrate to like the US and they have, their children, the roles kind of switch to where like the child now acts more like the adult, in that sense of like, having to translate for their parents, having to like navigate, through the culture, like the culture change, and all these other things. So it's like I found it interesting how like for them it's like, being able to do these things for their parents, they found it like, oh, like, I'm mature, I'm like independent, and kind of like a way for like their parents to respect them more in a way. Not that they were doing it for that reason, but they just found like that empowerment within that. um so I just like found that interesting. And then they also like one of them was talking, I think it was Sabrina on page 30. She says she was talking about like how she was translating for her father, and she says whenever he got frustrated he always yelled at me. I always cried, but I still had to get the job done. So like even though like sometimes, because it mentioned something about like having to deal with like legal documents as well, for someone at 10 years old, or like it was like stressful like on the child. So like that's crazy, and like it just brings back memories because like I myself had to do that at one point. So it's just so crazy though. Like the roles just switched, having to kind of be a parent in a way, but not because you're still a child. So
Yeah, like a lot of them were like 10 years old. There was like a girl named Nancy, and she was like in middle school and like beginning high school translating for her father's real estate business. And she would talk to a lot of Americans every day. And just because his English was terrible, and it was like the only way for her father to like succeed in the business was to use his daughter.
yeah.
There's also like abuse a lot of the times with like a girl named Sophia. And this is more of like how you like help your family's well-being. I'd say like she'd try everything she could to like stop her father from becoming angry. He would start yelling at her at like 1 p.m. and wouldn't finish for like 3 to 4 hours at a time, and just telling her she's stupid, you're not going to be successful, just basically belittling her. And he would also like use like, I don't know, he would like use her sister's academic success to kind of belittle her almost like psychologically.
Yeah.
But luckily, she put all of her energy and focus into her mother instead of her father, and I feel like this just illustrates one of the ways children support their like parents' well-being. This way, like she shielded her mother from her father's anger.
Yeah. Um, yeah. On page 37, it says Koreans face cultural and structural barriers as they seek help for domestic violence or mental health issues. Um, and then on page 39, it says females who translate for their parents, including higher psychological symptoms of anxiety or depression. Um, so I just found that like interesting how like wanting to like help your parents, but then at the same time it's kind of like again like carrying that stress of like, okay, I have to do this right, I can't mess it up, I can't get anything wrong, because then I get yelled at, or much like, or other things could happen as well. So like it's just crazy because it's like it's all on like a child. It's not like it's an adult. I mean, being an adult and having to deal with those things is a little bit different. But then how you said, Samantha, about like they just want to have, like, as children you just want to go have fun, hang out with friends and like all these things, and then having to have this responsibility at such a young age. It's like you can tell that like one might develop anxiety, or psychological, like other psychological things, because of having to carry this stress, and having and just wanting to help out their parents. So
Yeah, I feel like you
Definitely.
just nailed like the second part of the question,
Yeah.
intergenerational dependence. Just how like they both translate to each other and the sacrifices the parents have to make and the kids.
yeah.
No, I like how this chapter had a lot of like stories, like little stories of different people, giving us a different perspective. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I like reading it. I like reading them that way, and I feel like, I don't know, because it's like connected to like somebody's. I know that they come from real experiences all the time, but I like hearing them when they're this way.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
If you guys are ready, we can move on to the second question.
Yeah.
Okay, so chapter 2, what are the different motivations for Korean American children to give back to their parents? What are the different forms of expressions given back mentioned in the book? I have on page 46, in the efforts to understand what happened to their families during the Korean War, many respondents also started to find compassion and empathy for their parents, dysfunctional ways of coping with their lives. I just kind of saw this as like, um, like my grandparents were in the military. I'm in the military. It's kind of one of those things I want to understand why they did it. Um, that's how I kind of saw this. Like I feel like the kids wanted to understand their like efforts and their struggles and how they got here. And that was like the best way they can like repay them almost is to understand and not be ignorant of like what their parents had to go through.
Yeah.
But there's many more. That's just one of them I saw.
Yeah. On page 47 of chapter 2, it says it Kimberly talks about how like her parents like wouldn't talk or say anything like about like their trauma and like their past experience like coming from Korea at the time. Um and so like she had to like learn it with like it was like upon her to like learn it through like Asian American like studies to learn about it. But that just tells you like how much trauma like her parents like really went through, like just not wanting to even talk about it. But I think that it is cool, and like how you mentioned, Ryan, how you try to learn other ways of like why parents and like adult figures like do things. So I feel like that is like a way that they try to give back by like under even though they're not really giving anything back, it's just like trying to understand like, okay, this is why you did these things. Um and just trying to be like, more understanding than just like assuming things.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids were like very like one of the motivations for them was to like after noticing like their sacrifices and like on how page 50 it talks about how the parents' love was unspoken and it was shown in like actions like them working long hours and going long times without vacations and only spending money on their children. I think after once they like acknowledge like all the sacrifices their parents make for them, they want to be able to give that all that love back to them and probably more. And by that they would like, um go live life through like by how do I say it? By fulfilling their parents' wishes of like how they want them to grow up, like getting married, having grandkids, having like, stable jobs, even if they weren't what they personally wanted to do. But it was something
Yeah.
that was secure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on page 51 it says, but Roy states, it's not that we don't talk about it, talking about like, giving and taking, and it's a given that if they get old, I'll take care of them. Like you don't have to like talk about it. It's just how it is for Korean Americans when they came here. They don't really just sit down and say, "Oh, if I get older, are you going to take care of me?" If my parents get older and they need to be taken care of, they're going to be taken care of. This is how it is, and I feel like that's how it kind of was implemented in a lot of Korean Americans when they came here. I don't really see that as much in like white cultures.
Yeah. um on page 53, one of the respondents was saying that like to take like advantage of like the opportunities that like come along, and like just trying to do like their best and be like successful within their own careers was like it's like a big like thing amongst like children of immigrant parents, because they just want to show like, okay, like because you sacrificed, you work all these long hours like through my job and through like the career that I study, like I'm really gonna try my best to really um just be successful. And then I can't remember what page it was, but of how like, yeah, like once their like main thing is like being successful, is like being able to be successful in their career, and then later on when their parents get older and stuff, then they can take care of them financially, and for them that was like that's always like the common like theme of like wanting to succeed. That's what like strives them to do and want to do better.
Yeah, I agree. There's also other respondents who are really adamant about like pursuing their own interests just for the fact that their parents did the same thing, which I found very interesting. And it was mainly just to understand their parents and what they referred to as Korean mentality. But nonetheless, some respondents felt guilty at times about like choosing some careers paths
Mhm.
because it would be harder to like support their family when they become like older. There's one Sheila. She says she felt tremendous guilt because of the career she chose. It has affected her ability to make money for her parents. She feels that she has to make a very selfish choice. Her mother would say, "When are you going to be taking care of me? I'm already 70 years old. When are you guys going to be taking care of me?" She even stated like she didn't really nag her about this, but still like that pressure of like your mom telling you this,
Mm-hmm.
it's extremely hard to deal with. Like I would never want my mother to have to say that to me.
Yeah, one of the respondents on page 54, his name's Richard. I found it interesting because he said, "Oh, they have supported me, but I have not disowned me." So like saying how like, he wanted to pick and like, live his life the way he wanted to. Um like even though they like his parent like he knows his parents supported him, but he's like, I didn't disown me. So like he hasn't, given up on himself and like the things that he wants to do. So it's like interesting to like see both sides, like one wanting to like, pay back for like the sacrifice, and then the other half like understanding and acknowledging that, their parents did sacrifice and did, do all these things for them just, to be able to have, a good career and like, have a better life than them. But like still wanting to like choose to do like what they want, like just putting like themselves like before, I guess, in other words. Which is interesting because it does contradict like the collectivism that the like Korean culture has, instead of, like the American view of like being an individual and like, you know doing what one wants. So that like just shows how like, being like coming to America and, growing up here and like all this stuff, like you start to see like all the different aspects that they get from like each culture. So
Yeah, I'm starting to see that a lot more now. Just like I feel like when like kids go to school, they're in like an individualist kind of setting, and
mhm.
then when they go home, they're in like more of a collectivist kind of setting. So they're kind of like fighting each other every day, like
Yeah.
their values, and sometimes it could get warped, and it could be like very stressful on the parents and the kids.
Yeah.
Samantha was talking about how marriage is another way to give back,
Mhm.
which I found interesting. And then it was got even more interesting when they said like they only wanted it to be like Koreans or Korean Americans because it's highly prized, and they also wanted like college education for like people they married.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even still like a choice in that matter. And on page 61, they talked about Ryan, who was a Ivy League graduate, but because um he came out gay to his parents, they were very against his sexual orientation, which I guess I could see that. I guess Koreans just at this time were just not understanding of that at the time. But
Mhm.
despite anything, like he still did what he wanted to do, and Ryan tries to give back in ways without denying his own identity and desires. He tries to find different ways to give back.
Yeah, it's tough for the non, what do you call it, the non heterosexual Koreans to please their parents this way. So I don't know. I don't know like how. Well, based on the reading, it seemed like marriage was like really really important, and the grandchildren eventually was super important. Like I forgot her name, but she was talking about how her parents were like so desperate for her to get married. They like started saying it's okay if he's not Korean, like it could be any Asian. Then after that, he's like, I don't even care anymore what kind of ethnicity he is, just please get married. Like it was that
Yeah.
serious.
No, I remember that too. She was like 20, and then when she turned 30, they're just like, just get married already.
Yeah. Like to go like along with like, you know, why they wanted them to like marry other Korean or Korean American. On page 58 it talked about how like it was mostly Koreans wanted that because of like historical memories associated like um you know with the whole picture brides and stuff like that, like with military brides and stuff like that, and then you know the Korean War, and then also because of like the cultural unfamiliarity. So like I just thought that that's interesting because like you know all those things happen you know within their own time, but then it just like carries on you know like from generation to generation. Um so I just thought like that was interesting. It's just wanting again to have like that collectivism of like okay this is like us you know, um and trying to keep that culture within their family. So it's like marrying like outside of you know being non-Korean and stuff like that. Like it's just you know it just puts into perspective like how much like marriage and just culture to them it like it just means a lot to them. um but yeah, I just think it's interesting because again it's kind of fighting that of like wanting to like please their parents but at the same time wanting to uphold like their individualism. You know whether you know they're you know gay or they're lesbian, or if they want to you know marry outside of you know their ethnicity and um like all these things. So it's just like it's just so crazy because be like I know I keep saying it's crazy but it's I just think it's so crazy like you know kind of trying to be like happy and you know wanting you know what one wants and then you know having to please parents that like mean a lot to you.
I agree. I think the last thing they used was psychotherapy. It was used to like help communicate between parents and children if they were kind of like if there was really no hope. I think that was like the last straw that sometimes helped in ways so like they can actually start to help each other once again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad they sought out like um outside help for like mental issues and psychological issues, because I know like to this day I think there's still a stigma around mental illness and things like that in Korea. So it was good to hear that these Korean Americans were able to get that over here.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, Michelle, you nailed it when you said about like they're 10 years old, but they start to get like mental, like psychological issues for like being brokers for their parents.
Yeah.
I think these are kind of some of the things that had to come with it, like psychotherapy for these people.
Yeah.
You guys want to move on to the last question?
Yeah.
So, question 3, share one passage, concept, or detail from the readings with your group. Summarize its meanings or meaning, analyze its significance, and identify examples, connections, applications if necessary, and why it stood out to you. I can go first. Mine's not anything too crazy. It was on chapter 2 with Nina. She had a short, like 1-page story about her. So Nina married to another Korean American. Um, discusses the difficulties um, her and her husband faced due to his mother's lack of respect and personal boundaries for privacy. This one kind of just hit home to me, so I decided I would share this one. She talks about her friend's mother or mother-in-laws and how their mother-in-laws have keys to their apartments, and Nina believes like you have to call before you come over. You have to knock. Like, you're not having my keys to come in my apartment just because I am married to your son. What I liked about this one is they use psychotherapy. In like chapter one, they didn't even really mention psychotherapy. They didn't mention like, having like a middleman to help you sort out these issues. So I really like the way they like she concluded it was like she came to the realization it was their own issues, like her mother-in-law's issues and not her issues. And I kind of like that personally. And it wasn't about her, and it wasn't about someone coming in and disturbing their family and throwing their it was about someone coming in and disturbing their family and throwing their dynamics and their relationship all off. And I feel like it was good for Nina to like save her relationship just because of how Koreans are so collectivist and they're very family oriented. Because most respondents felt the need to please their parents, I felt like in these last two chapters, where she found psychotherapy to overcome her mother's like lack of respect and have boundaries which can ultimately save their relationship. Because at the end of the day, I feel like they're all still good. They just have like new boundaries and privacy sets, which I like.
Yeah. For mine, it was on chapter 2, page 66. It was when Natalie speaks about receiving psychotherapy as well, to help with her emotional struggles that she was going through. So she goes on to say, she says, I think they are really good parents, but they had a lot going on trying to make it. But on the other hand, they weren't like the parents you see on TV now, the prototypes that sit down and talk to their kids saying, tell me about all your problems. My mom tried to do that, but I usually didn't go to her. If I had something that was bugging me, I usually tried to deal with it by myself. That wasn't really good because you're too young. And then once I was in college, if I felt like I was struggling, I wouldn't let my parents know I was going through a hard time or something, but I would actually go to a counselor they had. They give student counseling services in school, and that was really great to be able to turn to a professional if I needed that kind of extra support. And then I had friends and peers, your friends, your girlfriends. So I just thought that that was like, it goes again, like I had mentioned, like hand in hand, like trying to, really help your parents, but then, at the same time, she didn't want to go to like her parents because she's like, I feel like in her mind it was, I even though like I'm struggling, like I don't want to let them know because I know at the end of the day, like, I wanted to help them. And um instead she just wanted to deal with it instead of, having her parents, worry about something else besides, the struggles that they were already going through. Um so in that sense, like she was just trying to help like herself so she didn't have to let her or have her parents like worry about her. So, like in a way, like help, like her helping herself was like helping like her parents in a way, even though her parents like didn't know. Um, but I just thought that that was like really interesting because it was again like that whole role of being a parent in a way. Even then, like her being an adult, and possibly having that conversation with him, but still, just wanting to figure it out on her own, so they don't have to worry about her. So I don't know. I found that really interesting. Um,
No,
and
I
just
like yours.
yeah.
Yours is good. Like, you shouldn't make people worry.
All right. Well, mine was from chapter 2. It's on page 63. It's the line that talks about how the children are mindful of their parents' agendas, but they're not defined by them, and they find ways to care for their parents and themselves. And I really like this line because I felt like I related to that because I want to please my parents, but I also want to be happy with what I do and do what I want. So I didn't take into consideration their wants, but I want to make sure that I'm happy too, you know, because this is my life. And these Korean Americans, like, they face many challenges growing up dealing with both like the Korean and American culture. And I know it can be hard to connect with either or both sides at times, and how hard it can be to please the cultural norms and traditions of each side, I guess. But I'm happy to hear that they have been able to find a balance of caring for their parents and themselves, because I feel like it's healthier that way.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Kind of like instead of like being a doctor, like your parents say, like maybe like try to understand like what they had to go
Mhm.
through, you know, like the little things.
Yeah.
Yeah.